Chris Walker, County Clerk. Thank you for inviting me here too. I really do appreciate it. My philosophy about elections is the more education we can give to, oh, standing right in front of it.
I'm just going to turn it off.
The more education, the more things that I can be out in public, the more that we can talk about the process, the more we can dispel myths and rumors versus fact and what's reality. The concerns of groups such as True the Vote. So I always welcome to come and speak in this capacity, and I like the question and answer format because I'm not just sitting up here speaking at you, we're collaborating together. And so I appreciate you having me here. So one thing about Jackson County elections is I've been county clerk almost 6 years now in February, which I can't believe it's been 6 years already. I have worked in the department for 19 years almost, in February as well. But we've made a lot of changes in the way we do things. I think it's a learning process, and you look at things that you can do and you make them better, that you can secure down the environment, that we can make those processes better, and we learn something every election. So, so Sandy's question, go ahead and repeat that.
Do the counties have a choice as to what machinery they're going to use to count the ballots? Are there a variety of systems?
That's a very good question. Yes, there are. Now, keeping that in mind, elections equipment is very, very expensive. The current machines we have are the ES&S 650s. We've had them 7 years. And who out there knows how old 7 years is in computer technology? It's ancient. They do run very well for us still. But we have one other problem with that, is that as of next year, Microsoft is no longer going to support Windows XP. The Unity software runs off Windows XP. According to ES&S, so the clerks around the country, not just Oregon, have put enough pressure on them that they are going to make that compatible with Windows 7. Because all of our counties have switched to Windows 7. We had to, because Windows XP is no longer supported. But Unity wasn't changed, but they are now working on that fix. We have been promised that for this next year before May. Very important, because that is how those tabulation work. What we did to try to protect ourselves with that, because even if Microsoft doesn't support Windows XP, it doesn't mean it's not just all of a sudden going to stop working. But there is a risk if something happens with that they won't service that equipment or that software. So we have actually cloned a machine, an exact replica of what we have, to have a backup for that, just in case, because we don't ever want to be put in a position where that primary goes down and we don't have a backup. So we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive. Now, we have the ES&S equipment. There's HARP software. There's a couple different vendors out there. Depending on what your state, we're vote by mail. So, of course, we're going to be limited. We're not going to have the tabulators that you would get at a polling place election where they just slip their ballot in and it counts it right then and there. So ours is key to those tabulation equipment. Now our ES&S 650s, when we bought those in 2007, were $40,000 a piece. We have 4 of those. They were not meant for folded paper ballots. They were meant for ballots such as a polling place election. You could stick them all through at once, and they're perfect ballots. So they're a little quirky. You have to put pressures on the holder that holds them in place so that they don't jam. And anyway, we have some great people that work with us every election, and who really know how to handle those things on that machine. But that being said, I know 7 years doesn't sound like a long time to people, but like I said, in computer years, that is ancient. The problem being is, that machine was at least 5 years older than that, because it takes the EAC, which is now according to what I've heard, a defunct federal program now, that is no longer in existence. But the EAC has to approve this equipment. And it took 5 years to get that equipment approved through the EAC. Then it has to go through state approval as well. So by the time the clerks get the equipment, we pay good money for this equipment, our equipment's already 5 to 7 years old. Well, now we're sitting on 7-year-old equipment that we've had in our possession. The technology's 10 to 14 years old right now. So we are going to have to look at new hardware or software. And there's some things being looked at by the Secretary of State with those leftover HAVA funds about, rather than everybody buying the new machines, which ES&S has an 850, which is just an amazing machine. I would love to have those, to the price tag of $100,000 a piece. And we'd need 3. We need 2 primary and a backup in case one went down to get Jackson County through. And I don't know about you, but that's how you think of that. That's a huge amount of money to have to put out for that hardware. Then, of course, it would come with the new software, and I can't remember, there's a name for it. It's not Unity, it's a different software. But, of course, these companies are in this to make money, so they create a different software, so you can't tabulate on Unity because you have to buy those machines to get that new software. And, of course, it's a business just like any other business. So we're looking at models of trying to use software and scanners and things like that that's just been thrown out there for tabulation purposes. Now that's, of course, that's way in the future, but we have to be looking somewhere because we can't every 5-7 years keep affording to putting out $300,000, $500,000, and it's only going to get more expensive as you move on. So that's a huge challenge for us right now. So,
could you comment on the military vote? Either one of you, actually.
As far as
the process, the timing, and why it's always in the news that they didn't come back in time and so forth.
We have strict deadlines, and actually our Secretary of State's office was very good at confirming with us to make sure that our ballots had gone out on time, and I was very proud to say Oregon's ballots went out on time. I can't speak for other states. I don't know what processes they have in place, but we do make every effort to make sure that our military voters get those ballots. And they have created processes such as we can actually send them an HTML or email their ballot, and of course then they can send that back to us because within that ballot they also have an envelope that they can fold up for mailing purposes as well. Years ago, I think in 2010, they had done where they could fax that into us on a secure fax. But what we found was, which didn't make sense to the clerks in the first place, was if you're out remote in the desert, you may have access to a remote computer or something, but who has access to a fax machine when you're out in the middle of the desert in a tent? So that piece didn't make sense. It's kind of why they expanded that, and the legislature did expand that to try those software programs for military voters. And I believe it was applicable to overseas voters as well, but I think it was key to the military voter to make sure that they had that ability to vote.
Do they actually get mailed earlier than we get ours?
They do. They do. We have deadlines. They have to go out way in advance of the regular ballots. Yes.
Does Oregon accept APO addresses?
Yeah, they get sent to APO addresses. Yes. Yes. As long as it's a standard military address and it's something that's acceptable by the post, the post office can read it. We will send them to wherever they ask us to send those ballots. And a lot of times, the APO's there, and then they're going to forward it because they've been moved 3 times already, but they have that link to where that person is actually going to be stationed at. Sir?
How many other counties are up against this Windows XP issue?
Anyone that has an XP machine or anyone that has a 650 or older machines.
Do you have any idea how many counties in the state are against
A lot of them. I really don't know. But we're not just talking Oregon. We're talking the entire country.
Well,
because these 650s are not just key to Oregon, they're everywhere. Because most states have absentee voting.
Okay. The voting system is operated independently state by state, correct? Mm-hmm. So what's your philosophical opinion on polling places? Wouldn't this be a good time to switch to in-person polls as opposed to vote by mail?
Well, you have to remember, we have a thing called the Constitution.
Absolutely.
And this was voted on by the people. So vote by mail was voted on by the people. I believe it was in the 1998 general election. So it was actually put in our Constitution. That would take a constitutional amendment for that to change. So that being said, at this point I haven't heard of any grassroots or any efforts being made to change that at this point. And I believe it was voted on pretty overwhelmingly, 60 to 70% to 30% or so that voted against it. So it is in our Constitution. It's not something we can just say, well, we want to change it. It has to be voted on by the people.
Well, you put a dollar figure on how much it would probably cost, estimated, just for one county. And if you multiply that number by however many counties there are in the state, that's a pretty compelling proposal for people to say, we don't want to pay for that upgrade. We want to go with in-person polls.
But keep in mind, you're still going to have to tabulate those ballots. They're still going to come back to the elections office and have to go through those machines. You're still going to have to tabulate them.
That would defeat the purpose of making the switch. So why can't we just go back to the good old-fashioned days?
Even then, even at polling place elections, you still have to put them through tabulation equipment. We don't do that by hand. Yeah, it's all done through tabulation equipment, which would be those 650s. Either that or we buy one or two $25,000 machines to be in every polling place to stick those ballots through. And we're talking astronomical costs, especially because we have some 57 precincts, I believe, now after the census was done, after redistricting.
It might require a reset in terms of people's expectations to wait a week instead of a day to see the results of an election.
You try holding off the monsters on wanting election results on election night. Yeah. No, in theory, I see what you're saying, and I respect your opinion on that. Quite frankly, I don't believe it's going to happen. I don't believe we will go in reverse. Yeah. I mean, that's just, if you look at everything that's happened and the investment into this, it would take a constitutional change, and I have not heard of any efforts to make that change.
What is your office's policy on public observation of the election process?
Very good question. I believe in a transparent process. Ask Larry. We have observers every election, don't we? Yes, we do. And Sandy knows that. Sandy has been a candidate. She has sat in there. And there's been several people's faces I recognize who've been in our elections office. I welcome observers. Elections should be a transparent process. And we keep it that way by allowing our citizens to observe the process. It dispels myths and rumors. It can educate you when you come in and you partake in that process. It's a great education about what we do in that office. I try to take my observers, get them signed in. Of course, you're under rules as well. You have to sign the observer agreement, and I have expectations of my observers. But I take you through that process, especially your first time. We handled ballots less with this machine. It's a fantastic machine. We're still working on some little things with it because we want enhancements done with it and stuff. But it's been fantastic for us, and I'm so glad that they funded that machine. In a county like Jackson County, we have a very small staff. I have a 3-person full-time staff, and one spends most of her time in reporting because we don't have the work in that office during a full-time basis. But we have her trained so that when we are in a big election cycle, she can come over and work in that office. So we have to do more with less. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's absolutely true in Jackson County. We're a larger county with a small county staff. So anyway, let me get on with, real quick, the sorter process. Once it's gone through the signature verification process, and that's where, as Larry performs those duties for us, they will look, and if they, with their quick look, we're not doing forensic verification. We are doing a look at the signature, and Larry can attest that you can pick out signatures. It's pretty easy to do, especially when you've got the ballot signature here, and you've got the registration card signature here. They're right on top of each other. And it'll put up to 4 per screen. We can make less than that if we want the signatures bigger. We can do the resolution sizes.
So are you seeing it electronically? On the same screen?
Electronically. Once we put them through the machine, it automatically basically exports that data, and then what it does is we can do the signature verification on it. Instead of hand scanning every single envelope, which takes 15 to 20 minutes right there just to do that, and then you used to have to pick up every single ballot and compare it to the signature on the screen. Now that's all automated, and they don't have to handle those ballots. They're kept safely over on shelving away from that area. So once they've been signature verified and they go through, and we might have some signature challenges. A secondary look is taken at those by a little more experienced signature verifier, and if she can't get the match on it, or whoever's performing that function, they then become, they go to Donna, which is my program manager. Donna's a 34-year veteran of that department. She's very experienced in elections. So she has a very good eye. And so that's the third look. They're looked at 3 separate times before it's ever considered a valid signature challenge. So we take special line. We want to do everything we can to count your vote. But we have parameters we have to live within as well. And during this process, if you're observing that, we also have papers that you can look at and see what the rules we're following. These are things given to us by a forensic signature verification expert, used to work for the Oregon State Police. And she does trainings for us. We either go to Oklahoma, they give them around the state, and periodically, especially on big election years. Every primary and general election year, we have those. I forget her name, last name's Carlson, but I can't remember her first name. But she does a signature verification training for us. And we give out those copies that we actually get at the training, and we give them so you can review and see exactly the things that we're looking at, criteria of how to signature verify. Like I said, though, keep in mind we're not doing forensic signature verification. That would take, you'd have to take a signature and dissect it in 5 hours. That's not what we're doing here. And I welcome you to see that process, because you can see with our people there sitting there and how they're working on that. So we go on with that process, and then they go into the sorter again once they've been signature verified. The data uploads into the system. Now keep in mind, the software that operates the sorter does not have a direct connection into OCVR, the centralized voter registration. You don't ever want equipment feeding into each other back and forth. So what we have to do is we have to import and export data. We have to push and pull data. There is no automatic data flow, and you don't want that because that is a security issue. So anyway, that we upload the data into the sorter from the signature verification, and then it does a fine sort of ballots. It sorts those ballots into individual precincts, and then it actually kicks out the signature verified ballots based on the coding of them. It kicks out the HAVA ballots. It'll kick out voted wrong ballots, which let's say somebody, let's say they got a ballot and they messed up on it and they wanted to reissue a ballot. So we can reissue, but what we do with that first ballot is we take and we, what's the word I'm looking for? We invalidate it in the system. We code it, so that's an invalid ballot envelope if that comes in. Well, if that one's voted, it's going to kick out. It's going to, in that voted wrong ballot. So we wait to see if the other one comes in. And those are things we set aside until after the election's over. And those are all little things, issues that we have to handle whenever you hear we're certifying, we're handling those ballots that we have. Those are the kind of things that we handle afterwards. The HAVA ballots are handled afterwards. Type thing. Help America Vote Act. It was after the 2000 presidential election they came up with this Help America Vote Act because of all the problems that were had nationwide. And they gave specific items that had to do. Those are the HAVA ballots I was talking about earlier that they failed to provide ID. Then we have to take those and we have to physically run the name and the voter ID in the system to see if they provided ID. So those are all things that we have to handle after the election.
So is that the only criteria with the HAVA check? Is just the ones that don't have a valid ID? Is that machine only for those?
Oh no, like I said, the machine, we have multiple, lots of categories that it'll kick out. The bad SIGs, the no SIGs, it has the HAVA ballots, it has the, we have confidential voters. Certain voters can ask to be confidential depending on if they are law enforcement. A judge could want a confidential vote registration. They have to apply for that. And we have one that'll kick those out. I can look at them and know that they're a confidential voter because I don't. Well, no, voter registration is public. How you voted is confidential, not if you're registered to vote. Yeah.
So like confidential as far as, when you register with the party or
No, that's public information as well.
They don't show up in the system at all?
They won't show up. Right, well, they're in the system. They're just registered like at a mailing address. And the machine kicks them out because they don't want that data flow because of the confidentiality of their status. But their ballots count and do all that as well. If somebody was to call and to say, I want an address for them, well, all we have is a mailing address. So actually, there is an address, but they've been coded so that that doesn't show up, so that people can't pull that information. So anyway, once that process is done, The ballots are fine sorted, and actually, once we get our slitter installed, it will actually slip that little piece off the very top of the envelope, basically to open that up so that when the boards come in and are ready to process, they're all prepared for them to process. These are all things we used to do by hand. So it really sped up our process a lot. But keep in mind, those are all preliminary items. They have nothing to do with the tabulation of the ballot itself. Anyway, go ahead. Any other questions? Thanks for your patience with that little explanation. Sorry.
Yeah, if a
Sam.
ballot is rejected because of a signature, does the voter ever find out that they're signing it wrong? Or?
Good question. Absolutely. We try to get out a letter immediately to them. Sometimes it takes us a little bit because when you get hit, when I'm always promoting people, vote early. When we get hit with those, we have to do all that. We have to go through all those things. If you wait to the last minute to vote and you do have a problem with your signature, it's going to take us a few days to get through those. We have to go through those after they've gone through the verification process. We have to look at them. Donna has to look at them for that third look. And then it's decided whether it needs a letter, and we send a letter in the mail. Now this is one of our changes that happened. There actually was, prior to this year, it was actually you had 10 days to remedy that signature. 10 days after the election was over to remedy that signature. We'd send a letter in the mail as soon as we could get that out. Sometimes it takes us 5 or 6 days to get all those processed. So we're getting the letter out as quick as we can. The voter had 10 days to remedy that signature problem, meaning they had to come in and sign the ballot in the office. Or send in a new registration card. But keep in mind, that registration card, if they send it, has to match what's on that ballot. Just like when they come in and sign it in person, that has to match what's on the system. If it doesn't match, it's not going to be counted. The change that happened is the voter is now allowed 14 days after the election to do that process. Now another piece that goes with that is, which was a recent change as well, is that after the 8th day, of the election, those ballots will now become not public, but we can print lists of who those voters are, which is always desired by the parties and interested parties to be able to get those people in to get their signatures remedied. What they do is they can pull a list of voters who have that signature challenge status, and we get requests for it all the time. Up till now, though, the Secretary of State has deemed those to be kind of confidential, but that wasn't released till after certification. But now the fix was that after the 8th day, those lists can be requested and, of course, paid for, and we will provide that information of those voters that have those challenges. Now, it differs because we call them a signature challenge, but the traditional challenge ballot back in polling place days was when, let's say Joe Smith was here and his neighbor was John, and John said, well, wait a minute, Joe moved. I know, he's on this poll, but he moved across town. So, and he voted his ballot at this polling place. So he had the right to say, you know what, I'm challenging his address of his registration. That would be your traditional challenge ballot. But when we went to an all vote by mail system, that changed a little bit. They call it now a signature challenge. And we also have the ones where people can challenge people's registration, that type of thing. But little change in the terminology from prior polling place elections. Questions, Amy?
Yeah, you remember Lemons versus Bradbury?
I remember it well. I was not county clerk at that time, so.
Yeah, during that it came out that the Oregon state law requires a comparison of signatures to verify the genuineness and not a match. And it seems to me that the Secretary of State is doing matches and not genuineness of signatures, because to certify a genuine signature takes a lot.
Forensic investigation is what that's called.
So
yes.
how do you get around state law?
I can't quote that law because I've never heard of that law. Quite frankly, we handle signature verification for Jackson County measures. We handle, the big change that's happened since then is, so we handle anything that comes into Jackson County, filed with Jackson County. We also handle candidate filings when they file, like the city of Medford requires that they gather 25 valid signatures, which could be equal to 40 depending on, because somebody could be outside your ward, they could be inactive, they could have moved. So we verify all those things within our office. But the one that has changed since I've been county clerk is now the secretary's office does all state petitions. We do not touch state petitions anymore. So I can't really speak on their end.
Well, do you think the signature, I think the signature for voting is the same as for petitions.
Oh yeah, it's out of the same Oregon centralized voter registration.
And I
Absolutely.
believe that the law requires proving a genuine signature rather than a match.
You know what, Sandy, I'd have to look that up because I don't know off the top of my head what the statute says. Yeah. I do know, though, that as a person questioned earlier about having multiple signatures, well, the only way they have multiple signatures is like you've re-registered from a move, and we discussed that earlier. So we keep that data in the system because it's history. So, go ahead.
Just so I'm understanding this, you've gone to great lengths to protect the ballots and to protect, make sure that they're secure and that someone, can't just stick in a zip drive and change the whole election. But I don't, I'm not feeling like there's a lot of work on the integrity of the ballot itself. I mean, if I can go to a homeless camp and just start registering people and then bring them in, I mean, it's like anything with a computer, garbage in, garbage out. So the actual ballots themselves sound like they're very secure once they reach your office, and there's great steps to be taken with that. But the integrity of those individual ballots, I think that's what we're having a hard time with.
Prior to coming to our office,
Right, yeah. I mean, what's to keep me from going to a homeless shelter and just start registering people, or registering my dog?
Yeah. It's a valid concern. Do I have the answer to that? I don't have a good answer to that. We try to do everything we can do on our end to prevent voter fraud. We don't investigate voter fraud at this level. That does go to the Secretary of State's office. But believe it or not, persons in a homeless camp have the right to vote. Just because you do not have a residence doesn't mean your voting rights are taken away.
If they're citizens.
If they're citizens, correct.
Yeah,
and they have to provide, they have to provide a mailing address. They have to provide a residence address, believe it or not. If they can put mile marker 6 on this highway, that is a valid address that we can put in the system and they can get a vote. But keep in mind, when we go to mail them that vote, it's going to have to go somewhere. And if that's not, it's going to come back to us undeliverable if it's not a valid address. But they do have the option to come into the office, and if they don't get that ballot, we can reissue a ballot and validate the original ballot. But we don't ever want to be in the business of taking away a citizen's voting rights. But it is a valid concern, absolutely. And it's not the first time that's come up, and it will continue to come up.
I get my mail at the post office, and every election I see ballots laying out on the table that have been delivered to the wrong post office box or people have moved. I mean, I never touch them because I think it's probably illegal for me to touch them. But so, what is the process you go through to, those are, who knows where they end up? But
yeah, that's a good question too. I was not aware of that. Yeah. I know that we have voting materials such as voters' pamphlets and stuff that are always delivered to the post office that sit out as well. The actual ballots, I have never had a phone call about that ever.
yeah, I've seen them, and I didn't know, can I pick them up and bring them to you? I don't know.
Yeah, I would stick it right back in the box because it'll come back to us undeliverable. If that's put back in, not their box, but if you put it back in a post office box, the post office is going to get it and it's going to be sent back or
They're
pushed out.
supposed to, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is I don't think they are. I think the post office does sometimes a lousy job of validating that it's the right person.
And I can't speak for the post office, but I do know that even if that ballot were to be, say somebody grabbed it and decided to vote it and send it in, well, that signature is not going to match, and we're going to challenge that ballot.
So these ballots have been delivered, they weren't, so someone went through their mail and said
And they
this
just
isn't
threw it
me,
out on the
and
counter,
they
so
just
the
threw it out
citizen
on the
just
counter.
careless with their ballot.
Right.
But that's not her fault.
Right.
So that one goes
But
back
I
to
guess
the-
I just want, I know you go through a process, if you could explain that, or is it just when you get an undeliverable thing from the post office, you fill out postcards, or what?
We have so many different processes with this. So, you get a ballot. Let's say that big election, you thought you'd re-register, you forgot to. You put in that mailing address change to the Postal Service. A lot of people think, oh, that's good, they'll just forward my ballot to me. But ballots are not forwardable in Oregon. Believe it or not, they are in Washington State, though. So those ballots are going to have that little yellow sticky label that comes on the front, and it's going to give us your new address on that. Quite frankly, during the elections, we have the option, if we have the staff to be able to update those and send out a new ballot, we will. The other issue is we have to confirm that that's an actual, that's you. The way we treat those is we get them in, and then after the election, we do those auto updates based on the return ballot. But as I say, most of the time, the way that the person catches those is they get to be about 2 days before the election, and they say, I've not gotten a ballot. And then they're in our office in that 100-person line trying to wait to get a ballot because they forgot that they had moved, and they just simply need to re-register. And what we would do is invalidate, again, the first ballot, and then reissue a ballot for them at their new address. Of course, because they could have moved from Ashland to Medford, they're going to be voting on different things, or different candidates, things like that.
I saw that line, the last presidential election, that tried to stop by your office. Couldn't
You
do
saw
it.
that line?
Yeah. It was like a big elevator with everybody crammed into her office. It was.
That's why we're making some changes.
You can remail a ballot to the address of the post office sent you back without them re-registering?
We can update that registration. Now, some counties do treat them that way. We don't have the staff to do that. We wait till after the election to do those updates. But a lot of the time on those, people are going to realize they didn't get a ballot, and they're going to come in and re-register to vote before 8 o'clock election night. Now, if that happens to you, know anybody that it happens to, and they say, well, I know I was registered, but I didn't get a ballot and I moved. They have till 8 o'clock election night to get into our office and fill out a registration card to update their registration. We'll go into the voter registration, and it'll do the comparison of who they are, and we'll update that, and we can reissue them a ballot right over the counter. Now, if they wait till the last minute, they're probably going to have to vote their ballot right there in our office. We do have some booths and some tables that they can use to do so. But that's why I always tell people, really pay attention to this. If you haven't gotten a ballot by the Thursday after we've sent them out, call us. Just call us. We'll look it up. We'll tell you where we have you registered. If that's not where you live, come in and re-register to vote. It takes effort, to be a smart and a voter who wants to partake in the process. We get blamed for a lot of people saying, well, why didn't you send this to me and that to me? It's like, wait a minute. The voting process should be something that you embrace as a citizen. It should feel an obligation to be able to vote. It shouldn't be that we're trying to make it easy on you, or we're trying to, that it's our fault that you forgot to re-register. And we get that a lot, too. But at the same time, we want you to vote. We want to count your vote. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure that the integrity of that election is upheld, but ultimately, we want to make sure that your right to vote has been exercised as a citizen.
If it's so verification oriented, why do we hear all the stories then about dead people voting, the dog being registered, getting a group from the homeless camp and bringing those in? How can that get through if there is such tight control on this verification?
A lot of it is, like I said earlier, are we perfect? No. There's not a perfect system in this world. But we do everything we can do to try to ensure the integrity of that election.
Is there any validation against Social Security? Yeah.
Well, that's part of the HAVA Act. Oregon law does not require ID. But you're only going to get to vote that local and state measures and candidates on your ballot. Those federal offices aren't going to be counted because of the HAVA Act, the Help America Vote Act. As I stated, was created after the 2000 election fiasco. And that was one of the provisions of that, was that you provide a driver's license or identification or the last 4 digits of your social. And there's another piece about identifying documents. They have secondary pieces that you can provide, and fail to provide any of that. But that is always a concern, and we try to run our registration rolls. I know the Secretary of State does do, occasionally we do the NCOA, National Chain of Address. We do a comparison with that. We do a comparison to the DMV records, to the non-citizen driver's card or licenses that are out there compared to the citizen cards. They have done comparisons with, I believe, Arizona. I could be wrong on that, though. But I know that they are starting to reach out. They're working on a program with Alaska, Washington State. They're trying to expand that. And I know the Pew Center is actually doing a study as well about trying to collaborate Social Security, driver's license, possibly passport, Children and Family Services, a lot of different agencies that can collaborate their identification and their addresses and basically compare those Social Security numbers, all the different criteria, whatever they're using, to try to collaborate to come up with a recommendation of how we should proceed to move forward with voter registration in the future. And that's a national study being done by the Pew Center. But right now it's preliminary in that.
So let's say that you find Jimmy Jones, who fraudulently registered here under that name. What kind of prosecution or punishment are we looking at with Mr. Jones, who has fraudulently registered and fraudulently voted?
There are a lot of cases of the Secretary of State taking and implementing punishment on those, and they're well aware that I'm sure there are cases out there of that. If that person is registered and what was that?
Is it a rule of thumb that they be prosecuted, or is it one of those things that...
If you read the card, I believe it's a $125,000 fine. Now, I've never seen a $125,000 fine come through.
Have you seen fraud prosecuted here in Jackson?
Absolutely. Well, we wouldn't prosecute it in Jackson County.
Why not?
Because it goes to Secretary of State. We do not investigate or prosecute fraud in Jackson County. That is a function of the state.
Do you recommend?
If we have a case, yes, we take the entire file. We'll take the registration. We'll take any documentation that we have. They interview us. I one time had a gentleman come down from the Attorney General's office. He was an investigator for them that investigated a case that we turned in. So yes, they do prosecute. And this was a very serious offense. We had a gentleman that brought him and his wife's ballot in, and he wanted a replacement because they had voted one that they wanted to change their mind. I'm sure we'll issue a replacement, so we did this in the system. We gave him a replacement, took the old ballot, and we put it in a pile that gets destroyed, where we take and have those confidential records that we destroy. And they were given their new ballot. So we reminded him that he can vote his right now and replace it, but his wife needs to vote her ballot. And he was back 5 minutes later and we heard clunk. And I thought, what went on? And so we pulled those ballots out of the ballot box. And sure enough, he had just voted his wife's ballot. And so we immediately took those and turned them into the Secretary of State. And that was that particular case on that. Now, I've never heard what happened to him, but I know they did charge him. And I know they had come to I thought they were offering him something, and he wouldn't agree to it. So I'm not sure how far that went beyond it, but we did have an investigator come into our office, and absolutely they prosecuted that case. Now I know there's been a lot more around the state, but that's one I can speak about in Jackson County.
Would you be able to estimate, in your opinion, the percentage of fraud here in Jackson County? Do we have a problem with that, or?
I don't believe we do. Like I said, do we have a perfect system? No, we try to make it as best we can. But I wouldn't even know where to go with that. We've had that case, and in my time, in my memory, that's the only case I can remember. We've had others that we have turned in, like say you get a challenge ballot signature and you don't remedy that. If we're looking at it, and we can pull history from a household, we can see every household member, and we can see, okay, look, this signature on Jimmy Joe's ballot looks just like John's ballot. Even though it's Jimmy Joe's name, it matches John's signature style. And if we suspect that, And we do those every election, and we turn those into the Secretary of State for further investigation. Because when you can pull that history, you can see household somebody signed that other person's ballot. A lot of times they give them a very stern warning. It is a felony offense to sign someone else's ballot. And they do follow up on every single one of those that we send them.
What about power of attorney? Does anybody ever say, I have power of attorney?
Power of attorneys are not valid on the
Not
ballot.
valid.
Yeah, we do get occasionally, and it's usually an elderly person who is ill. And they say, well, I have power of attorney, but that does not work for voting purposes. So, absolutely not. We get those maybe once or twice in election.
How many signature challenges would you guess you got in the last general election where you had to mail it out?
We had over 1,000, and a lot of those were remedied before that 10 days. Of course, now they have 14 days to remedy that. Like I said, we want to count those ballots, and if that 14 days gives that voter the opportunity to remedy that, I'm all for that. The second piece that we get a lot of is unsigned ballots. People turn in, they forget to sign the outer envelope. So what we as well with those, we send them a letter as well. We try to call them, but once you get busy in that election, a couple days before, you don't have time to call. But they are now being treated exactly like challenge ballots. They'll have 14 days to remedy that unsigned ballot and still get it counted. That's why we have a 20-day certification period, so we can clean up a lot of these things, and we give those voters ample time to be able to make those corrections or to remedy that signature problem.
And if they don't correct the challenge, they don't get the next ballot on the next election?
No, it does not work that way. On the signature challenge, those are going to be sent to the Secretary of State if they haven't remedied, and we feel that it was a fraudulent, somebody signed the wrong ballot envelope. Now they will go, the signature challenge people, the challenges, will go inactive because they need to come in and fill out a new registration card with a new updated signature or with something like that. So they do go inactive after the election. It doesn't mean they're not qualified to vote. It means that before they will get a ballot, they need to come in and re-register to make sure that we've got the freshest, most up-to-date signature on the file. And quite frankly, that if they've moved or anything too. And on the unsigns, I don't believe those are going to be treated the same way. We had some changes in that because they just forgot to sign their ballot. There's no reason, we weren't challenging their ballot, they just forgot to sign the ballot. So those would just stay, ballot would count, but they'd still be actively registered to vote.
So I'm still a little unclear on voting like after 8 o'clock. Is there someone at each box and it's locked after that point, the drop boxes?
The box is still, they could still put a ballot in there, but once it hits 8 o'clock, all those ballots are pulled, and then they're brought back to the office. So that ballot is, the next day we go and close those. We have our pickup teams go and pick up those last remaining ballots that came in after 8. So they do pick those up the next day.
To them
they are time stamped, and they are written that they were received after deadline.
And then when are they destroyed?
They're held just like everything else. We have strict rules about 2 years we have to hold the ballots. Those are no different than any other
So they're
thing.
not, late ballots aren't destroyed?
Not immediately, no. We have to hold on to those, so if we ever have an audit, we can show the ballots that were dropped off late. If somebody calls and said, well, I got my ballot that was only a minute after 8, they wouldn't accept it, and they put it in the box. They can call us and say, can you check on that? Well, we can look in our box of late ballots and say, well, it was time stamped that it was late. Whether
We have a county that comes in there.
a what?
A county bounty.
Oh, yeah, from Road River Shop site, yeah.
They come in there, and they are standing out there by that thing, and when it's 8 o'clock, that is the end.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And yes, at the county elections office, on primaries and generals, large elections, we have sheriff's deputies right on site. And the biggest piece of their job is of course, to be a presence in the office, because we've never had any problems, but you want to make sure that you have security. But two, when it comes time for that drop box out front to close down, we have the one deputy that takes his car and goes at 8 o'clock exactly, gets behind the last car in line. So if you're in line, and the line's down to the old courthouse, and we're at the old Safeway building, which is about 5 blocks down, and we did have that in 08. As long as you're in that line, you have started the process of balloting. You're just waiting in that line. So we cut off that line with that car, and he follows that line all the way to the ballot box. And when that last car is done dropping their ballot, That's it. And we've had many people who come up and want to, at that point, their ballot is, once we pull those ballots at 8 o'clock, it's done. The same goes for inside the office. If we have a line of people and they're all trying to get ballots, if you're in line, we've started that voting process, so we will make sure that you get through and make sure your vote is counted.
No one else can get in.
No one else can get in though. Yeah, we have somebody who watches that line as well. Usually by that time in our office, it's slowed way down. It's the line outside that is continual. Yeah. And the same goes for all the drop sites, 24-hour drop sites. We have pickup teams that are waiting there for that 8 o'clock, and once it hits 8 o'clock, then they close those and keep those ballots up. Go ahead.
How does a person get onto the monitoring team that works election night?
We don't implement a team. What happens is usually your local parties have integrity committees or an integrity person that sets up the schedule for their team. And that being said, I have, like I said, some guidelines, and I'm going to go through that with all the parties again as we're coming into a very large election year. Some of the things that we have to deal with are, you've got to schedule, we have a lot of things going on. I'm running the ballot sorter, any issue that comes up or a problem, I'm the one dealing with it. But I also handle all of the observers. So it's really important if you do act in that capacity. Now keep in mind, candidates can have observers as well. Every candidate can have an observer.
Can a group like this have observers?
You would come in as a citizen. Yes, as a citizen observer, and that is allowed as well. Keep in mind, we only have limited space. We only have so many areas, so I have to keep control of that. I can't have 100 observers and 50 workers. You know what I mean? That just would not be feasible. I could not keep control of that. And our biggest concern is the integrity of the election. But the parties usually hear a lot of that, and usually the candidates are so busy campaigning and stuff, they may have an occasional person come in that they really rely on the parties to help in that. But I said they're all allowed to have observers. But my biggest thing is making sure that when we set time, I communicate with the parties, whoever else is asked, and email them, like we have a daily schedule. With the sorter, it has made our processes faster. So we find that when, during a regular election, primary or general, we may be in at 8 o'clock every morning to do all of the processes, and we have signature verified, we have the sorter, we have the opening of the actual ballots on the boards, and we have tabulation. Well, we might only be doing one of those processes. So with one of those, I don't need 2 or 3 observers from each person. We only maybe need one to watch. So the biggest part is coordination. It can be very difficult. I try to email those parties to let them know, hey, this is what time we're going to start tomorrow. Larry's done it where you guys got so caught up, we didn't have anything for you to do till we got ballots the next day. So they weren't coming in until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I coordinate with that. But my biggest thing is coordinating with the parties and the interested parties that they need to make sure and have the people on time. Because what happens is I get 2 observers showing up at 8, then the next, well, I had to get a coffee, so I arrived at 8:30. Then I got a couple others that said, well, I thought I could show up at 9. I was kind of busy this morning. Well, quite frankly, that's my biggest pet peeve is when we have a set time, they need to be there at that time because we're being pulled 100 different directions during an election. And I can't sit there the entire time and just try to get observers signed in. So one of my big things is to make sure that I pass, that's on my end, I need to give that expectation to the people that are going to observe. They need to be on time and plan on a 4-hour shift, or if you want to do it all day, we break for lunch at 12 to 1. We have 2 regular breaks they take. Those are the kind of things that I need to work on myself and make sure that that expectation is given out to the parties and to all observers. So that being said, if you're ever interested in observing, give me a call. I can sign you in as a citizen observer. I have one lady that used to come into the party, now she comes in just as a citizen because she didn't want to affiliate with her. She wanted to come in and observe the process, but as a citizen.
So what about the election boards? How are those people selected? Are those paid, volunteer?
They're all paid. We have no that aren't. We find out it's just as easy to pay them as it is not because of the county volunteer laws, they have to go through all the same things as we would if they were paid or not paid. We find by giving out minimum wage that a lot of them keep coming back to help
So
us.
you do advertise those every year?
We have a regular that we keep on in the county roles already, and then what we do is we had to outsource that to personnel source is who we go through. It all depends on who the county contract is with, and that's how we get we usually can fill most of our boards, but we might have an occasional where somebody's sick or somebody that day for some reason or another. So then we can call personnel source, and then basically they're brought in and they're trained on the job. Now a lot of those people do come back and help us every election. Then we just put them in on the county roles. Like Larry is, he's a regular, so Larry just comes in with us every time. But we do have people that, it's quite a learning process, and they come in and just, their eyes are wide open, and they leave saying, wow, they felt accomplished. They feel like they're really doing something. Because without our citizens doing this, we couldn't do this process. We so rely on our citizens that come in and help us with this. And they're just like you. They're just people that are concerned. A lot of them are people that used to work the old polling place elections. And that was their way to contribute to the community, to stay engaged, and they could continue that. We have some ladies been 30 years doing this.
So like when you need to fill one, you say, I need a Democrat or Republican?
Absolutely. We have to be mindful of party affiliation, because if we have a table with 2 Republicans and one Democrat, we probably need to fill it with either another Democrat or independent or a non-party affiliated person. And that is according to law. We have to do that. We can't have a table with 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Absolutely not. That's another integrity issue of that election. So yes, when that is a piece when they do apply to become a temporary elections worker, they have to provide that information to us. Now, the other way we get election workers is we have observers that come in. And they go, I want to be part of that next time. So we take their name and phone number and their address, and we put them on our call list, because those people have seen the process and say, I really want to do that. I want to be involved in that. And that's where we get some of our best people, is by that process. How did you come in, Larry? That way? Did you observe and then?
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah. It's very interesting to me, because I took a 3-month course on graph analogy over at Stock when I went to college.
What's that called?
Graph analogy.
Signature verification.
Oh, I'm not sure. I call it signature verification. I don't know what that is. Excuse me.
How does your office deal with purging the deceased and the movers and all of that?
A very good question. We get regular lists from the state monthly about a death list. We also get that from our local registrar, our local county health department of deceased. We will get lists from other states. This person is deceased. A lot of states send that information out to the counties, or they'll send it to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State will separate those out and send them to the appropriate counties.
How often do they do that?
At least monthly. Might even be every couple of weeks. I think the state list comes monthly, but our local county comes sooner than that, because we can get it from them.
She had a comment. Do they do that equally for all party members?
I don't think they look at party affiliation when somebody dies. I don't think that's listed on the death certificate.
So you immediately remove them from the rolls then once you verify?
Yeah, once we have that. The other way is if you have somebody pass. I had a person who was in our recording office the other day, and they were recording that death certificate. And I told them, if you would like us to, I can take a copy of that, and we can take them off the registration rolls, because people forget. They take care of the property stuff, but then they forget about the other until they get a ballot in the mail, or if it's been quick, they sometimes, then we can get that off there. Or the other thing is, if you know someone and you do get a ballot, you can write on that outer envelope, deceased, please take off registration rolls, and send it back to us, or return to sender. We'll get that as well. So we do our best to get those, and we collaborate with the state, we collaborate with other counties, with other states, and try to get those deceased registration rolls. And keep in mind, they fail to vote for so many election cycles. They're going to go inactive. Let's say it just happened to be missed, or they passed away in another state. Say they were snowbird, and it never got recognized. Well, once they've not voted for so many elections, they're going to go inactive. Then once they haven't voted in 2 federal elections, then they're going to go into the purge file after they've been put inactive. So there's laws that regard how we treat inactive voters and voters that have not voted in certain time periods. And that also as well, a deceased person could fall into that realm as well and be purged off the list from that.
So this last spring, I submitted, I believe it was around 900 dead voters, according to Social Security Master Death of the State Secretary and also all the counties.
I remember that actually when that happened.
There were very few here, and they were all inactive voters here. But, so I commend you for.
Yeah, we had a couple, but you're right, they were inactive. They were not in the.
I had found some that were active,
Mhm.
and that had voted in, one of them had voted in 2 elections, and the other one had voted in 1 election. But that second one, the county clerk said they had caught the signature.
In the verification process.
But the one voted in 2, and I've never heard anything more from the secretary or about any prosecution.
And I haven't either on that. I do remember when that happened though, because we had some and we checked those. And there were some that were in there, but there were some that were not matches to people we had in our files either. So, because we checked the date of birth, the social, or the date of birth, the full name, those type of things.
So it sounds like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck would have a hard time voting here.
Yes. But they do get votes every election. Well, every big election.
Oh, they get votes.
They get written in, yes.
We had over 300 of them, I believe, had been on the voter rolls for over 5 years.
The people that have died.
Yeah, and that could happen, and I could see if, say, a spouse, they got the ballot and they just threw it away. Now, but the thing is, though, they should go inactive after not voting for so long, and then, of course, be purged after missing so many federal elections. So that would escape me of why that was happening.
Sounds like you're continually purging.
You're constantly re-registering. It's just a daily process. Doing those comparisons.
It's not like a once a year you go and look
Oh, no.
as information comes in.
No, no. Yeah, like I said, is it perfect? No. But we do our best, and you have my guarantee that we are doing everything we can to keep the integrity of the election, but also the transparency of that election here in Jackson County.
So like, you heard in the last presidential election that there were some precincts back east that there was 110% of the voters turned
I
out.
heard about that, yes.
I don't understand how that, I'm assuming you validate registered voters with number of ballots that come in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming, is that pretty hard to do, or is it just some counties?
If we had 110% of the ballot, there's something suspicious going on, and you probably should be very worried. I would be. That would be very concerning. Absolutely. And I heard about that, but I never heard what the end result was of why that happened. Janice, did you hear anything in your?
I know that Truder Vote sent those the county clerks and secretaries of states in those areas letters that they would sue them if they didn't update their maintenance of those voter rolls.
I think it was in the 2012 election, at the end where you make phone calls to people that you still have on the list who haven't voted yet.
Oh, right.
Get out.
We call that an activity list, and the parties get those activity lists.
And you encourage them to go vote if they haven't. I ran across a woman who had received 2 ballots, one at her post office box and one at her residence address. And what happens with that?
A lot of time what we have is we have a time where we have to do a list. We have to send the place that's going to process our ballots, not process them, but prepare them to be mailed. We can't possibly wait till registration deadline to run that original list. Now what we do is we run a list about a week earlier. So from the time we run that original list and get it out to the vendor that does this for us, we've got a week worth of people that are re-registering. We have thousands in that last couple weeks. Then what we do is we do an update. We do those remainders of updates. Well, keep in mind, some of these people could be people that were already on that original list to get a ballot. Oops, but then they re-registered to vote in that time frame. And in that time frame, by updating their address, they're going to get a second ballot, because we've already ran that first list, and we can't purge off that list now. So we get that second list that we send to the vendor, and we get those ballots sent out. So they could get 2 ballots, but keep in mind, the first ballot is going to be invalidated in the system, because we have re-registered them at another address. And that's 99.9% of the time why somebody gets a duplicate ballot, is because they have gotten that deadline, they've re-registered to vote, and they're going to get those 2 ballots. But if they were to turn in those 2 ballots, it's going to kick them out, because we've already got it pre-coded in the system, because we reissued a new ballot for them based on their re-registration.
So they thought the first ballot would count, it in fact didn't, if they didn't send in the second.
And we have rules regarding that as well. That's why I remember earlier I said in that sorter we have a bin that will kick out voted wrong ballots. We pull those aside and we keep those set aside, because we're going to watch for, quite frankly, we're going to watch for that next ballot to come through. So what's going to happen is when we put it through the sorter, or when it goes to signature verification into this whole process, it's going to come and basically kick it out, saying that it's already been that it's already had a ballot voted, basically. So we're watching for those 2 ballots. Then what we can do is pull the correct ballot, and the other one doesn't get voted. It gets time-stamped and gets put, it's an invalid ballot. Now let's say somebody takes and doesn't send in the second ballot, but they vote the first ballot. There's ways that we have to remedy that as well. What we would do is we pull that aside and wait to see if the second ballot comes in. Because in Oregon, you can vote once on an address change. So like say you've moved, you have the right to vote once on that address change, and then we're going to put you inactive, and you're going to get a letter in the mail that you need to be registered to vote. And the reason we know that, because that second ballot, say we never got that second ballot, and you've already got, excuse me, I'm getting my things mixed up here. We never received that second ballot, but we know that we reissued the ballot. So if we get the first ballot, which has been inactivated, and we never get the second ballot, we're going to count the first ballot. And those are, again, those issues that we handle after the election. Those things, and that's why I said we have this huge amount of time when people say, well, why do you still have ballots to count? It's because of all these issues we have to deal with. Yeah. Yeah, and those are usually administrative rules that we have, that are guidelines and rules that tell us how we have to treat certain scenarios. And when you think, oh, you've probably seen every scenario, every once in a while you get something, you go, we don't know what to do with that. So you're consulting with the Secretary of State or other, trying to figure out how to handle those ballots and where it would fall under any category. Because like I said, ultimately we want to count your ballot. That's what we're here for.
So do military ballots have to be in by the deadline? Or
Yes,
they
do.
still have to?
Just like every other ballot, yes. At 8 o'clock.
Do you know, or can you say anything about further exploration and use of iPads and smartphones?
Haven't heard a lot of that. We did experiment with that this last election cycle. It was mainly for our ADA, our accessibility for persons with disabilities, where you could take that iPad and have them vote right on the iPad. They would hook up to a printer, and then the ballot could be printed out. Of course, then they could sign the envelope. They could send it in just like normal, or you could bring it in for them after they've signed the envelope. And then, of course, that ballot would have to be duplicated because it's on regular paper stock, not ballot stock, which goes to the tabulators. I have not heard if they're going to expand the program. They have not given us any information on that, so I'm really not sure. They use the Every Vote Counts, I believe, system to run that. And it sounded like it was fairly successful for the persons with disabilities. We had nobody in Jackson County use that. I think not that people don't want equipment, especially persons with disabilities, but I think they want to use their own equipment. If you have a disability, I want to use my own computer. I don't want, and I want to do it in the privacy of my own home. I don't want to have somebody come to my home. I want to be independent. And that's what we're finding, is that most people with disabilities want to use their own equipment. Or, worst case scenario, they just want to come in and sit down with 2 mixed party affiliation persons in our office and be able to vote their ballot. We always encourage them to bring a family member or somebody with them, so that there's a good mix of people that can help them vote that ballot. Yeah. Or at least mark the ballot and the parts for them. Of course, they have to sign and all that. So we want to be really mindful of our persons with disabilities and making sure that they're able to exercise their right to vote.
So is it illegal to help somebody fill out their ballot as long as they sign it, or?
What we recommend people do, sometimes you have a person who, quite frankly, can't hold. We always recommend that they put that in their hand and they can help guide their hand. But that's why we have other people who are observing them voting, so that what I've done in the past is we've been there helping somebody, and I have always have one of my deputy clerks. And then when we're done voting that ballot, I will read them the votes back, and I'll have my other deputy read them to make sure that they know, and the person that they brought with them, say a family member or friend, that they can see that their intent is on that ballot.
Well, I know my father was in an assisted living facility, and he said, oh, there's a lady coming in today to help us all vote.
I don't know about that. I did go to a place in Talent to help people register to vote, but never went in to help somebody actually vote. I would highly recommend, if you have anyone like that you get a family member or a couple family members or friends to sit down with them and do that. Yeah.
Chris?
Yes.
We have a family member in that category, so I called your office and I said, how do we make sure that nobody goes in and helps him with his ballot? Well, she said to have the ballot sent to my mother. My mother will go and talk with him and help him.
Yeah, and that works as well. That's why I recommend a family member or a trusted friend.
Yeah, so
I would even have a couple people.
To the center.
Right. And you can do that. That would be strictly a mailing address. Yeah. Anybody else have any questions? So we could go on for hours. I know, really. Yeah, you have to have a physical residence address, because that's how we know what you vote on. Because, of course, like I said earlier, if you live in Ashland, you're going to vote on different things than you do in Medford. But you can have a mailing address, like if you're a snowbird, or if you have P.O. box. Yeah, you have different mailing address. But we have to have that residence address so we know what ballot to send you. Anyone else before we close?
I think this has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Great concern. I'm hoping Donna's good for one more presidential. And she said she bought a new car, and she said until that's paid off, she won't. So that gives me like another 3 or 4 years. Then we'll be on the hunt. So, yeah. Thanks, everyone.